Hello everybody, I'm the Spuddler and this is my channel and I don't really know what to do with it. So today I thought I would just show you some very calming pictures that are from my conservatory, and I'm going to explain some of the birds that we see for the overseas viewers who may not know the names that we use here for these birds, and some of them you may not have seen before. Just for context, I live in South Wales in the United Kingdom, and I often say that I live in a wood, and I think you can see why. Anyway, we love our birds and our wildlife here. We have an organic vegetable plot, and we also have, as you can see, flowers in our window, which attracts the bees and the other insects, which in their turn feed the birds. But my main love is feeding the birds that come to my garden every day. And you're going to see in a minute quite how busy our garden gets. The noise you can hear in the background is, as you always get in Wales, it's the rain. And you often see that the birds will come out between showers, frantically eating, and then they disappear again. And you're going to see a little bit of that here. So initially I was just going to put up a quick rough video and talk over and be silly. But as I went into it, I started to look into the birds that I'm showing you, and there's some quite fascinating facts. So I've changed over to a different camera, set it up in a different position and muted it so you don't have to hear the rain. And I'm just going to go through and explain some of the birds that visit my garden and a few facts about them. Oh, and apologies for all the reflections. Can't seem to do anything about that right now, but I'll try and sort it out if I do another video of my birds. Just as a side note, we actually have birds living in our house. We have an extractor fan in one of our bathrooms, which they decided to nest in. So we have some wonderful blue tits nesting in our extraction fan. We also have another family of sparrows who live in the guttering just at the front of our house. And it's quite common for us to hear the chicks tweeting away first thing in the morning and last thing at night. Oh, and just in case anyone was worrying, we also have isolated the power to our extractor fan so there won't be any chopped chicks around. This year, for the first and hopefully last time, we got some new residents to our house, and that was a pair of jackdaws. They managed to get through the capping in the top of our chimney and decided to nest in it. Now these birds are real predators. They love to eat young birds and unhatched eggs. So we don't really want them on our house, and also obviously they're in our chimney. So we're going to try and persuade them to move on. Just in case you're interested, here's what they sound like. And now imagine that coming from numerous chicks echoing up a chimney. And that might give you a little indication of what we had to listen to in the late spring, early summer of this year. Anyway, moving on from the slightly less welcome residents of our house, let's go back to the bird feeder and I'll introduce you to some of the birds that regularly come to my garden to feed. This bird feeder is surrounded by bushes and trees, so the birds come in from an awful lot of different angles, and a lot of them will sit in various trees and bushes, either waiting for their turn or gathering up the courage to come in, because it's quite a scary thing to do, to come to a bird feeder, I suspect. Having said that, they've actually got used to us and they've got used to our bird feeder. So they are pretty brave, and it's quite interesting to see how the different breeds get on, some of them better than others. Let's start off with the blue tits. After all, they are residents of the house. Yes, I know, it's a rather unfortunate name for a bird, but there you have it. We've got a lot of tits in Wales, and I'm going to show you 3 types of them. If we switch to a different video, which was taken slightly later on the same day, I can talk to you about them in detail, and you can see one of them flying in right now and landing on the fat cake feeder. Gosh, they love those fat cakes. But here's a picture of the bird that you're looking at, and it's a blue tit. These are tiny little birds. They're only about 12 centimetres long, with a wingspan of about 18 centimetres. And they only weigh 11 grams. For the international viewers out there, 12 centimetres is around 5 inches, 18 centimetres is around 7 inches, and 11 grams is 0.4 ounces. Blue tits eat insects, caterpillars, seeds and nuts, and they are particularly fond of my fat cakes. And as these tiny little very cute birds enjoy eating caterpillars, by introducing them to our garden, we're also enabling them to keep control over the caterpillars that like to munch the green leaves, lettuces and cabbages that we're growing in our vegetable plot. What distinguishes the blue tit from the great tit in the main, as their names indicate, great tits are larger and blue tits have blue caps on their heads. But the easiest way that I've learnt to recognise and distinguish between the two is by their size, but obviously you'd need to have them next to each other for that. So it's actually really whether you can see their eyes or not. So if they look like a monk wearing sunglasses, that's a blue tit. And if they look like they're wearing a black cap pulled down over their eyes, well, that's a great tit. But just to show you a real life comparison between the two types of tit, the ones that are on this nut feeder at the moment are all blue tits. They all have those little caps on. And here comes a great tit. I think we can all agree that they are slightly different in size, and if you compare their head markings, I think you can see the difference. So we've covered the blue tits, we've covered the great tits, and now there's one other tit that comes into our garden, and that's the coal tit. And here's one just popping onto the tray for a quick snack. Apart from their monotone appearance, the biggest difference between blue tits, great tits and coal tits is their beak. The coal tit's beak is slightly finer than the other species of tits I've discussed, and this enables them to feed more easily. I've also recently discovered that they hoard their food. They come along, eat their fill, and also take some home for later. Personally, I think that's quite clever, but I now know where all the seed disappears to. So that's the end of the tit section of this video, and now I've got a special treat for you. While I was doing some videoing, one of my regular visitors, but is incredibly shy, turned up, and I want to introduce you to him. And here he is. Meet Mr. Edward Woodward, one of our resident greater spotted woodpeckers. Woodpeckers are absolutely fascinating birds, and often here you'll hear them knocking on trees, and that's really the only way that you know that they're around. They are incredibly shy birds, and to have them visiting our bird feeder every day is a real highlight. These stunningly beautiful birds have a body length of about 22 centimetres, a wingspan of about 35 centimetres, and they're about 85 grams in weight. Again, for our international viewers, that is a body length of approximately 8.5 inches, a wingspan of approximately 14 inches, and a weight of 3 ounces. The bird you can see in this photo here is a female, and I know that because there isn't any red on her head, it being only visible on her undercarriage. Or more accurately, I think they're known as vents in the birdie world. So the easiest way to identify between the males, females and the juveniles is by their heads. Here you can see a male woodpecker feeding a juvenile. The male has a tiny patch of red at the back of its head, whereas the juvenile has much more broad cap of red. The greater spotted woodpecker, which is the ones we have in our garden, are actually increasing in numbers recently, so that's good news. We're hoping to help keep those numbers rising, and as we are surrounded by ancient oaks here, it's perfect habitat for them. If I freeze this video, zoom in, and sorry about the water blobs on the window, but I think you can still see that this woodpecker has a red flash at the back of his head. So that's how I know this is Edward Woodward. Edward has been coming to the garden for most of this year, and in the early spring we used to see him with his mate. This pair recently introduced their new chick to our bird table, showed him how to feed, and now he visits our table on a regular basis too. I am hoping to capture some pictures of baby Woody, who we've named Twiggy, maybe in a different video, as he seems strangely elusive at the moment. I think he might be camera shy. One fascinating fact about the woodpecker is that they have a special way of protecting their brain from the drumming on tree trunks that they do with their beaks. They have a number of different mechanisms that absorb the shock from banging against the tree trunks and to prevent them from getting headaches. The most notable one is that their hyoid bone wraps round the back of their head and creates an extra protection from their brain against the shock. There also are a number of other clever ways that the bird is able to protect itself from the shock of the constant drumming, and some of these clever mechanisms have been adopted by manufacturers of protected headgear, as well as the shock absorbers that are used in most machinery these days. Anyway, that's just a side fact, but I find that absolutely fascinating. Okay, so it's time to leave our greater spotted woodpecker, say goodbye to Mr. Edward Woodward, and move on to the next bird that visits my table. So next up, and one of the most frequent visitors to my bird table, are the sparrows. There are two types of sparrows that come to our table. Those are the house sparrows and the tree sparrows. Because we have residents that are house sparrows, the majority of these little birds that come to our table are in fact the house sparrows and not the tree sparrows. But we have seen a few around. I just haven't managed to catch them on video yet. These are gregarious little birds, and when I was a child living in London, I can remember seeing them all around me when I was outside, on pavements, at meeting places, around cafes. I came across them everywhere. Sadly, despite having an abundance of them in our garden here, both the house sparrows and the true sparrows were shown to be in rapid decline from the 1970s right up to 2008. However, recently there are signs that perhaps the population is increasing a little, so that's hopeful, and I'm very happy that we're supporting them in our garden, especially because they are considered really quite so endangered right now. These little birds almost certainly live in the bird boxes and the crevices of houses surrounding us. Also, some of them are probably the residents of our own house, and I have to say they are our very welcome guests. So next up on the smorgasbord of bird life are the collared doves. These are part of the pigeon and dove family, and I think they're really rather elegant birds. These birds are pinkish grey in colour, and I think it's obvious why they're commonly known as the collared dove. This is what they sound like. They're about 32 centimetres in length, which equates to about 12.5 inches. Have a wingspan of about 50 centimetres, nearly 20 inches in length, and they weigh about 200 grams or 7 ounces. This pair are often seen in my garden, and they come to feed every day. But to be honest, they do spend most of their time hanging out on the roof of the bird feeder, bird watching. Or maybe they're just trying to work out how they can hang off the hanging feeders like the other birds do. Little known fact is they weren't introduced to the United Kingdom until the 1950s, when they kind of flew up from the Middle East and made their homes with us. I guess they came for a visit and decided to stay. These elegant birds enjoy seeds, nuts, shoots and buds, and I'm sure they have been chomping away in our vegetable garden for months. Because our garden is organic, we allow the birds to come and go as they want and feed on what they want. But I have to say it does explain now why I had to plant our peas and beans 3 times before they were allowed to grow this year. If you notice at the moment, there's absolutely no birds on my bird feeder, and you're soon going to find out why. And here he is. It's a magpie, and when they're around, the other birds run and hide. These beautiful birds are the predators and scavengers of the bird world. They're omnivores, which means that they eat, well, pretty much anything. But technically that simply means that they eat animals as well as plants. But they really are the scavengers, and they do love a fresh egg or a freshly hatched chick. Hence the reason why none of the other birds want to be anywhere near them. Having said that, I haven't ever seen them attack one of the birds if they are near to the bird feeder. And I allow them to come in, and I leave them some mealworms in the seed tray to supplement their diet and hopefully stop them eating those chicks. When there aren't any mealworms around, as you can see, like with the other birds, my fat cakes are their favourite. I think these are the largest birds that visit my bird table, coming in at a grand 46 centimetres in length, which is a little over 18 inches, with a wingspan of 60 centimetres or 23.5 inches, and a weight of 200 to 250 grams, which equates to around 8.5 ounces. Here's what they sound like. Not exactly the prettiest song I've ever heard, and these are definitely the bad boys of the bird world in my mind, and I keep a careful eye on their behaviour. Oh, and if you're in the true crime community, I'm seriously considering naming these individual magpies the bad boys of the bird world. I wonder what names I'm thinking of. Well, that's the end of the introduction to the birds that come to my table. I started off trying to make a video here that was just quick and to cheer me up and the people that I know in the true crime community that are actually in a very bad pace right now. But as with everything with me, I looked into the birds and suddenly a small, quick video turned into a week's project. A few tips for anyone that is thinking of feeding birds. Don't ever give them anything that has got salt on it. It's highly poisonous to birds. With regards to peanuts and large seeds, always make sure you pop them in a cage to prevent them having access to large pieces, because if given to the chicks of some of these birds, the chicks could choke. So make sure that anything that's large is either in a cage, so they have to peck at it to get pieces off, or that you've soaked it thoroughly so it's nice and soft when they eat. And as grubs and mealworms often come dried, just give them a little soak overnight and that should do the trick. One final but very important tip, as there is an awful lot of bird flu around at the moment, try to remember to wash your trays and feeders at least once a week, and that will ensure that the birds that come to your garden will stay as healthy as possible. Now, I am definitely no bird expert, and I really just wanted to put this together to cheer everybody up, including myself. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found some information in there that was fascinating. And please remember, look after those birds.